retail consultant and podcast host. And today we're going to be talking about EPR, which is Extended Product Responsibility. And we're going to be talking about what it means, how to prepare, and how to turn it into a business opportunity. Before I start and introduce my two lovely guests, I'd love to have a show of hands of what you understand about extended product responsibility. So 1 being I really am not sure about it at all. 3 being, yeah, I've got a fair idea, and 5 being, I'm absolutely an expert in it. So hands up, kind of, you have no idea about what EPR is. Don't be shy.
Sorry.
Okay, great. 3 being, yeah, I've got an idea, I'm okay with it. Okay. And 5 being, I should be on your panel, I'm an expert. Okay, thank you so much. It gives us an idea of how to gauge what we're talking about today. So, I am joined by Niall and Gerard Fisher. Gerard, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
Hi, I'm Gerard Fisher. I'm the Chief Executive at WEFT, which is a new company helping brands in Britain understand what the implications of EPR might be on their business and how that might align with what's going on in Europe.
And Niall?
I'm Niall Maplesden. I'm a director of a business called the Knowledge Nexus. We help brands with everything from EPR all the way through to garment technology, fabric technology, and everything else in between, really.
So, Gerard, can you give us a clear definition of what EPR is and isn't?
Do my best, because there's lots of different versions. So we have it on packaging, we have it on electricals, we have it on batteries, and it's not yet in place on textile products here in the UK. It is just beginning in Europe. And the idea is that there's a charge added to the product at the point of sale, and that charge helps to fund the future collection and recycling of that product at the end of its life.
Okay, and we are behind in terms of where Europe is. What's the main kind of, how is our approach different to what the EU is doing?
The EU is actually doing textiles EPR schemes. So France is the most obvious example that has a trial scheme in which they originally brought in for packaging, and then they extended it to textiles a few years ago, which is weirdly where my business started. But then you've got the Netherlands are looking at it, Lithuania is looking at it, a few others. And then you look and they're all doing slightly different things. There's no uniform approach with anything.
And for the UK at the moment, it's a directive.
For packaging, we've been part of the Waste Packaging Directive, which was originally came in 1994, and we had 30 years to sort it out. So it had to come in by the end of 2024, which it did. So lots of people know it as the plastic packaging tax.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's fine. But for textiles, we've got nothing. Now, Gerard and I disagree on the next thing I'm going to say. At the minute, we've got a new government. They've been in power for just over a year. They haven't got it on their agenda for this Parliament.
Okay.
The previous governments, 2 previous governments, said there will be no textiles EPR scheme. So when would it come in? It's probably not going to be this Parliament, in my opinion. But Gerard and I disagree on that.
And Gerard, what do you think is the most, do you want to address what Niall said there? You okay?
That's right, get your question, that's fine.
No, I was going to ask you, what is the thing that you think people misunderstand about EPR?
I think people see this as a new cost and a new charge to businesses, and that's where the cost will be applied. But don't be working under the misapprehension that the system doesn't already cost us money. So we're buying something like 1.5 million tonnes of clothing products in the UK every year. Somehow we are funding the collection and sorting, recycling or dumping of those products, whether it's in landfill, whether it's getting sorted and being sold to end markets. So that cost is already there, and what this is trying to do is move the cost to the point at which the product is sold. So the person buying the item is paying for its ultimate recycling.
And if a brand was starting from scratch now, so when we did our show of hands, a lot of people that are in the audience that this is very new to them, what would you say, how are they to get ready for EPR?
If you're starting off from scratch, you're in a unique position. You need to gather as much data about whatever product you're making at every point of its manufacture. So if you sit there and say, I'll take my shirt as an example, you've got your fabric, that's great. Where's the fabric made? What yarn is it made out of? Which dye house is being used? Which dyes are being used on it? Find all of those pieces of information. You may not need them all, but it's easier to have them at the beginning than try to find them at the end. And because Europe is fractured over how they're approaching this, some of them will need more information than others. So if you look at Tryman in France, that's got a very rudimentary requirement for what is known as a product passport. It's a very rudimentary look. And it has a very simple statement that if you're over a certain percentage of synthetic fibres, you have to have a warning on there. Great. Not everyone's following that. Some people will want it in greater amounts, some people will want it in lesser amounts. So the more information you have about your product, the better you're off.
You mentioned when we were talking earlier that, and like you said there, that lots of different countries have different regulations. So if you're a brand and you're exporting, like Niall said, it's getting all that information. You might not need it for every country, but if you're holding it at the beginning, then you've got that information ready, depending on what country that you're exporting to. And Gerard, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people have about EPR?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is really that it's not necessary. It is actually a vital part in funding how our downstream system works. So if you look at the existing collection and sorting processes that we have in this country, they used to make a lot of money out of selling those products overseas onto valid second-hand markets. Those markets are rapidly disappearing. They're becoming overwhelmed with everybody else's used clothing, and also the quality of clothing that we're shipping out is reducing in terms of durability and value.
Yeah.
So there are fewer outlets for it. So this problem is coming home, whether we like it or not. We need to face up to it and start dealing with it ourselves.
So in terms of there's no hiding your head in the sand if you are a brand owner.
And to Niall's point,
that way.
the more data you have now, so you can engage with that system, understand the potential costs of that system to your business. And from our point of view, we would say, advocate for government about how that system is set up, how those funds are deployed, and how the costs are attributed to your business or your products, so that you can have a robust discussion with government about that pricing. Because we've seen in the past with batteries, with electrical equipment, with packaging as well, prices get put in place and they have horrible implications for businesses coming out of the blue. So now is your opportunity, while government's still thinking about it, to go in with your arguments about should it be based on product durability, should it be based on recycled content, should it be based on recyclability. Understand what those mean for your products and present those to government with a real case of how it impacts on you.
And even though it's not in place yet on textiles, so on packaging, it's either 2 million turnover or 50 tons of packaging, and there's a fee that you have to pay, or that you're eligible, you have to.
You end up having to pay anyway, but you can offset a certain amount if you're, correct me if I'm wrong, if your packaging has a certain percentage of recycled content, then you're not liable for any plastic packaging tax. But you still end up having to pay partly into the scheme anyway. If you're over 50 tonnes, you basically pay more. And you are in theory, and I say in theory, supposed to be offsetting the costs of your waste removal and recycling, which you should be doing. However, the UK government website doesn't currently allow you to do that.
Okay. And Niall, in terms of where money is concerned here, what's the kind of, there's a worry that EPR is just in the fee, it's just in the cost to your business.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So we had a fixing fashion report back in 2019. The government first talked, the Environmental Audit Committee talked about a penny on every garment. More recently, RAP has talked about 10 pence on every garment as a fixed fee, just regardless of how well designed it is or how durable it is. We've actually recently done shopper research, so we asked 1,700 shoppers what price would they not even notice on the cost of a garment, down as low as £5, £3. They've said they wouldn't even notice 50 pence. So the potential to raise funding to support the collection and recycling of products is potentially much bigger than we thought it was. And actually 7 out of 10 shoppers want to see that value put on the price because they want to see the items going to be recycled at the end of its life. they actually get quite frustrated that there aren't these outlets for putting products in a bank and making sure they're going to get recycled in this country.
And even though it's not a directive, it's not a regulation yet, what are the things that brands can be doing to mitigate potential costs in the future now?
Really, it's playing like any other financial plan that you're doing. When might this regulation come in? What might it cost my business? And how am I allowing for that in my accounts? If you look at packaging, for example, I think there was a Financial Times article earlier this year saying the packaging regulations are going to cost Marks and Spencer something like £40 million a year. If you're thinking of that level of cost for your business, if you're one of these big brands, you need to start planning how you're going to have that money, how you're going to pay those compliance fees.
Cap in on that one as well. Certain brands went and sorted this out very well. So the retailer I used to work for, we changed all of our packaging to be compliant. We changed even down to the Kindle tags used on certain products to be compliant, to be with the recycled content. So that although you might turn around and say, yes, we hit a certain amount of waste, everything we sent did not hit the plastic packaging tags because we saw it coming. We made it out of recycled content, and we just spent more. You spend more, but we weren't being charged tax at the end of it.
Yeah. So you saved
save money.
in the long run.
Understand the business case, absolutely.
And how does EPR help towards a more circular system, Neil?
EPR gives you lots of data. It gives the ability for items to be recycled. But we have to bear in mind with a circular system that the last thing to happen is recycling. Your item needs to stay in being used for as long as possible before it's recycled. I'm going to use an example. I've got a wallet. That's made of Harris tweed. It'll probably last longer than I will. My sons will pick that up. They'll probably throw it in the bin, but that will last a huge amount of time. I know it will. So on your scale of things, it would come in really well. It's got really good durability on it. It will last a huge amount of time before it's ever needing to be dismantled and re-put back into any system at any point. So that's greater than 10 years at least.
And that's the thing, I think the system has to be able to fund, certainly incentivise that kind of durability and choice of better materials, however that's defined in the regulation, but also the system needs to be able to fund things like growing the repair infrastructure in this country, reinvigorating the repair systems that we need. So, for example, in France, there's you can claim money back. You get a garment repaired, you can send off and get a refund from the central system for having had a repair done to a garment. So the potential for this fund to pass money on to repair systems, to aftercare programs, to resale and reuse business models like rental is potentially very huge, and we can start driving more circularity of whole garments before they ultimately end up at end of life and get recycled, as Nick says.
Yeah, I mean, as a brand, you can also think about the materials you're making with and what waste from the cutting area of the process. Where does that go? So the brand I used to work for, we made a lot of things in tweed. All the offcuts of tweed were then sent to another factory. They were sewn together, and we made little key rings in the whole woodland creature type things, and we called them tweedles. We never ever threw away tweed. We bought it specifically, somebody cut it, we gave it away to somebody else, and it was all put together. That was really great. We never told a soul about it, but it was really well done.
But that's the other thing, it can also fund brands. If they're doing collection of waste products, if they're providing repair services, why can't they have money back out of that system as well? And encourage the ones that are doing the more sustainable activities.
But currently in the UK, that kind of funding or those kind of programs aren't available.
Not yet.
Okay.
There's lots of talk from different people saying we've got automatic sorting processes, etc. They're talking about it. We've been going down a conveyor belt and an infrared scanner looks at it and says, this is made of that. It's great. I like wearing dark clothes. Dark clothes aren't great for going through scanners ever. Do everybody remember the things with plastic trays that were black? You couldn't recycle them because you can't tell what plastic is made of with these same scanners. Well, are we going to ban black clothing?
I'm not, no.
we can't do that. It's too big a market. So there has to be more to it. There has to be better regulation, better labelling, and easier fashion of doing it. So some of this comes into another piece of regulation that's coming on with the alleged digital product passport. If people talk about that, everybody says, oh, it's going to be a QR code, you're going to scan it, you're going to be able to read. It doesn't say that, it says by electronic means. So it could be anything. It could even be an RFID tag somewhere on the actual clothing, and they could be made into threads nowadays. And if that was the case, that could be scanned, and that could say, this started off life here, it's made of this, and that would be a far cleaner and simpler way for everything to get recycled and sorted.
And I think that's the thing I build on with other regulations like digital product passport. Then, there's a need there to start collecting data so that you can prove the provenance of your product. The same data is going to be useful for extended producer responsibility whenever that comes in whichever country it comes in. So 26 European member states might all have different requirements, but they're probably going to be based off similar sets of data that you need.
And there's fines associated, there would be fines associated, which there is in place with packaging side of things, and
Yes.
if you don't adhere to it, that can.
So we've had brands step over the line into beyond the de minimis on packaging in the UK, and they've been caught as having not self-declared that they were, and they've had to pay a fine and pay their previous obligations as well. So
to give the audience an idea of the fine, the size of the fines are quite sizable, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
It can be, yes.
It depends on which country you're in. So certainly EU countries are aiming at global value of a brand, so they will say it's 10% of global revenue. To put that into context, that equals no profit this year, in simple terms. To give you another idea, yesterday, Shein, Shine, whatever you want to call it, the French authorities fined them $40 million US.
For not having the right records,
for not dealing with something else. But it's the level of fine they're aiming at textile companies. They're not. It's not anything to do with digital product passports or EPR, but it is the kind of fine they're aiming. And they're basically saying it's business-ending fines. And that's what most people are looking at. Inside the UK, the last piece of legislation came which has said it fits onto Tier 5 in the Magistrates Court. Tier 5 is an unlimited fine and up to 5 years in prison. And that's where it'll hit people, is when the C-suite have to go and they may not go home that day.
So don't put your head in the sand,
No.
and don't not collect information about where you come from and down to the more granular level, which you may not be doing right now. And Gerard, about durability then, why is that so important in this context?
Well, the idea, to put this in context, the government is currently undertaking a review of circular economy and has a task force looking at how this might work. And the core thing in circular economy is buy deep, green and make it last. Make a sustainable product, make it durable, and use it as much as you possibly can. So durability is a core requirement there. The challenge, I think, for the sector is testing and proving durability is very, very challenging. There's lots of different standards and methods, and whether it's on the yarn or the fabric or the finished product or wash testing, it can get horribly complicated. So I think there's a concern about how expensive that might be, depending on how it's implemented. But the point for us with EPR is start with the things that you can prove early doors, your sourcing chain, the types of yarns and fabrics you're using, and then maybe these can evolve over time. But if we all understand what the cost of those might be, we can have a decent discussion with government about how it's implemented before they just go and put something in place.
And if you're a small brand, in terms of collecting that information, at the moment it doesn't need to be anything fancy, it can be an Excel spreadsheet and you've just got it there by product.
Absolutely. To chip in on the durability, there's a certain brand out there, shall we say they're Dublin based, and that's all I'll say about them. They recently started to look into durability of their products, and they've insisted that each one of their products in the testing phase has an appearance after wash in 50 washes. How on earth is that remotely environmentally sound that during the development stage you're putting something through 50 sets of water, 50 times your amount of water used, and wastegate is using more water than washing machines? That's a huge amount of water. It's something like 5,000 litres for the development stage of a product. You could get all that data from the yarns you've used, the way you've knitted it, the way you've put everything together. You can say whether that will or won't be durable. That's what fabric technology is about.
So you need to have tests to prove it though.
You don't. You can make a product, for instance, if when you're spinning your yarn, you were to compact spin your yarn, that will never pill. Ever. Doesn't matter how else you make it. If you've made it from the correct tension in knitting, the correct way in weaving, it's not going to have various other problems. If you look at something and you go, oh, I've made that the correct weight, I've made that the correct number of ends and pins, it's just old-fashioned fabric technology, which is what people used to do. And in fact, it's so old-fashioned that inside the UK, the Ministry of Defence still has standards in place for everything. So a shirt will tell you what weight of fabric it is, how many ends and picks, what the yarn looks like, everything, and they know that will just then perform. That's how it works. That's old-fashioned fabric technology, and it does work, and you don't need to go and then do the testing. You may need to do it initially, but you don't need to keep repeating and repeating and repeating because it's the same product. And if you get something that works, stick with it.
And what do you think, both think that the mindset shift needs to be for people that are listening or about EPR?
Okay, do you want to say that one first?
Yeah, you go
I
first.
would say don't be afraid. It is coming, whether you like it or not. Engage with it. Learn how it's going to work for your business, for your brand. Understand what the impacts might be, whether the fee is based on a per garment basis, a weight of sales basis, something to do with recycled content, something to do with organic content, or whatever it is. But understand your product portfolio in that context and work out which of your products are at greatest risk of the highest fee, and then see if you can do something to minimise that obligation in the future.
I think the way I look at it is design, and I don't often say this, but designing problems out before they get here. So if you can make it from a fabric that works, you know you're going to have less problems. Factory down the road might be marginally cheaper, but is it the same fabric? Is it the same fabrication? Is everything else the same? This is, you might be buying more expensive products, but your end cost to the business will be lower. That's the way I would view it. Just bear in mind, look at everything you're doing, make everything work for you. And I think that works in a far better way. The other thing is engage with people that are, I hate using the phrase, experts in the field. There are loads of groups out there. There's a small brands group, there's larger brand groups that get together and talk as individual brands. They speak quite regularly. Join them, turn around and listen and say, what is everybody else doing for this? How have you gone down? Do I need a system to support me? What systems is everybody else using? They'll quite happily tell you. They'll tell you all the pitfalls along the way because they don't want everybody else to make the same mistakes.
And it doesn't have to be expensive either. So we did a project last year with 6 brands. We analysed 250 million products within a matter of a couple of months to give them this kind of insight and analysis on which products were potentially higher risk. So it can be very quick depending on the quality of data you've got. So it's going and finding that data and the design information. It's important.
Thank you very much. And what questions do you have about EPR? Do you need any clarification about anything? We've got a question down here. Karen, where are you with you? I love that. We've got questions straight away. Thank you.
So we were just talking about your last point there was about the fabric being fit for purpose and risk assessing it, and obviously the ends and picks being good quality. But in response to that, where margin is so tight for lots of brands these days, and obviously have to compete with the likes of Shein and whoever, how do you balance that price with obviously going down a cheaper route and obviously having a cheaper fabric and therefore not as good quality, performance and durability, and having a higher price point fabric that is better durability, and obviously the consumer's price, I don't know, am I explaining it right?
You are.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. But the catch-22 is, do I spend more on fabrics and then potentially make less margin? Well, think about it from the other point of view, at the other end. If you spend more on your fabrics, you don't have to, pay so much for the EPR scheme. If your EPR was, say, £10 for your garment because it's a really low quality one, as opposed to £50, all of a sudden your profit and loss suddenly looks a completely different place.
It's really hard when you're at the level and you're at design and buying level to communicate that to sign things off higher.
Yes, but
I'd also think about it from your customer point of view. You're
Yes.
going to have less returns. So you could say, right, the returns for our business cost us X. You're going to have less if you invest more in your quality. And you're also customer trust and your loyalty, your repeat customers. There's different things and you can analyse that. That if you're providing a certain quality, and it's where does your brand want to be? Do you want to compete with Shein? You know,
The younger generation, that's what they're buying. There's a generation younger than us that are, there's a generation younger than us that are more eco-conscious, I do believe that. But the generation below that are heavily tech-based, they don't visit shops. They have a smaller, like, disposable income as well. So, like, you know, they've spent loyalty or whatever, but they just shop on Shein, anything wrong with that. Even if their parents working in the industry and tell them.
So we recently did a survey of 1,700 shoppers in the UK, you know, typical mix of shoppers.
what age range?
Everything adult upwards, so not under 18 because of ethical issues there. But they were telling us 7 out of 10 of them wanted to see this kind of fee introduced, and they wanted it shown on the price ticket. 8 out of 10 of them wanted it shown on the price ticket. And in fact, 6 out of 10 of them would really like something like a traffic light system to indicate how environmental friendly or otherwise the product was. So if we start to communicate things really, really simply, it will drive that behaviour change. Even in less environmentally engaged groups, there is interest in having that information available, even if they might not act on it every time.
I think it does. There's an app at the moment, I can't remember what the name of it is.
It's on the news.
It's for products. It's for physical products like skincare, beauty. Yes, and that scans the barcode, doesn't it, and you get the traffic light. And that does influence then other people's purchasing.
That's engaging as well. I think that would be great for the younger generation. Because again, it's a fad, it's an app, and they use it.
And it combines the tech.
what we're talking about is like food packaging. You look at food packaging, there's numbers written behind those colours. It's the colours that everybody looks at. I'm not picking up unless it's green, or I'm not picking up unless it's orange. In my case, red. But you just turn around and it becomes simplistic for people. Yes, you can put your numbers in. I have in this industry a huge amount of things that people say about carbon. People like to talk about carbon a lot. Does anybody understand it? It's accountants do.
And that's a concern. If the EPR fee was to be based on carbon impact only and not durability or not some other element, what the hell is that going to do to all our businesses? So this is our point about trying to get the data now and engaging with government to say, look, if you do it this way, this is going to be the impact on our business. The methodology behind it has to be agreed, how we're going to do that. There's lots to go through. The best thing is to start getting data now and to try and get ahead of the game in terms of understanding what that means for your business.
Any other questions?
Hey.
Was there a question here? No? Yes.
In terms of the digital passports, it can seem like quite an interesting project to start. Where is the best resource of finding out exactly what we should be collecting? Because when I've looked online previously, it seems very, very vague.
It is.
So if it's someone's sole responsibility to start putting this information together, where do you start?
I'm going to do a tiny pitch, so I apologise. But you pop over to J23, I've actually got a little fact sheet. You can pick it up and tell attention to all the 16 points that they've labelled. I've tried to apply it to textiles. If you then flip it over, there's a nice little checklist. Have you got it? If so, where in your business is it? The obvious thing to say is, if it's in a system, put them all in the same system, because then you can report on it. It's an obvious thing to say. It just helps if you go, right, that's what they are, kind of thing. Put them over. It's not absolute at the moment, because there's a regulation in place for digital product passports for everything. And I've tried to apply what they say to clothing. For instance, one of them is manual or an instruction manual on clothes.
Well, your washing instructions.
Well, it's literally care labelling washing instructions, but it kind of has to fit that way. So we've tried to put that together, so please come pick one up, and when you get a little confused, just come and ask other people. I mean, we run a small brands group for any brand that wants to join, and we do it purely for compliance. We do it every 4 weeks. And the first thing on the agenda is digital product passports, because it will arrive next year. And at that point, we'll know actually what you need to do, and you'll have about 18 months.
There are other channels as well, like you can follow Eurotex, they're engaging with the European Commission on the process and the definition, and they'll tell you the same thing's vague.
Yes.
And what kind of things are for the digital product passports? So those people that weren't aware of it or don't know about it, what are, say, like 5 things that they're asking? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay, they're looking basically at, it's not even going that far back, it's going material supplier, and it's not telling you to go beyond fabric. It's not telling you to do dye houses, it's not telling you to do various things, but it is telling you to look at the GTIN numbers, which is your global transfer numbers. It's how it's taxed, it's all the other little bits for how you bring it into the country, what's it brought in under. And those you should know. You should know all those because you're actually bringing the products in anyway, so you should know all of those type of things quite easily. I think the last one is what are you part of the EU I think it's called Eco Passport? Is there a scheme out there called Eco Passport where your product can already be, claimed to be eco-friendly? It says, oh, is it that? And that's the 16th. So, there's a lot of things that you already will have the information. It's all fairly readily available. It's just the only question I have is what use is it to the consumer? The GTIN number for this was this.
And how many, back to the point where you say, how many of the consumers are actually not to the correct information? It can be a lot of energy for relatively little.
And is there a fine associated if you don't do it?
There will be, so when they bring it in, it will be a mandatory requirement, and it's more than a fine, it's a case of they'll pull your clothing as well. So you won't be able to sell in that country, you'll be able to sell in the EU if you don't have it. There's lots and lots of platforms out there that tell you they can do digital product passport, but at the minute nobody quite knows what it is. So they're possibly going a little bit too far, they're possibly maybe not going far enough on some of them. So, and to a great extent you're going to put the information in there yourself. So you'll have it.
Just might be in 10 different places.
It might be in 10 different places, but then the best advice is put it all into one place.
Because you need to do a free EPR eventually.
You're going to have to,
Bear in mind, in the Netherlands at the moment, all you need to know is the weight.
Yes.
How much weight it's selling. So that doesn't need all that DPP stuff yet. If they get into eco-modulation, they might start asking for more.
Yeah.
We don't know when that will be.
And for packaging, for instance, you need to know the weight of every piece of packaging that you have. Well, sometimes that really helps the brand. So, for instance, when I last worked in retail, we looked at our plastic bags. We had 48 different sizes of plastic bags.
Poly bags, yeah.
Poly bags, that was it. And we went, well, hang on a minute, that's a bit silly. So we cut it down to 12, and we made those 12 avoid the plastic packaging tax by having them from a single source that everybody had to purchase from, and everything had to fit into those 12 bags. That's it. Then we had our bag for our econ bag. We turned around and looked at it and said, now we know what all weights are, we know what sizes everything is, and we know exactly how much packaging we're doing. It's a little bit of work, but it wasn't as big an amount as people think it is. It just took a little bit of work to go through and say, that's what we're going to do.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. You can connect with Gerard from WEFT. Niall, what's your stand number again?
I'm Gen 23 with the Knowledge Nexus.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.